Hello and welcome back to my channel, and welcome to the first video in my series for BX Dungeons and Dragons solo campaign. I'm very pleased to bring BX Dungeons and Dragons to my channel. It was the winner of a poll I just recently took of my what I call my tranche 2 RPGs, and it won by quite a margin. It had over 50% of the votes. It came in first. It had over 50%. The second was Stormbringer RPG, and the third was Aftermath by FGU. All three of them will be coming to this channel this year, but BX has the pride of place. It is coming first, and I'm personally very pleased that I'm dealing with BX first. I think potentially it's not going to be an enormous overhead on my channel and my resources. I think it might almost act as a form of in comparison to some of the other games I'm playing, it might actually act as a bit of a light relief. It is not a rules intense system. We're talking 2 rule books here. We've got I think it's the Moldvay 1981 basic set with this amazing picture on the front. It only amounts to 64 pages, I think. Yeah, goes up to B64. And then we have the expert, the cook expert. And again, it's got 1980 here, but it's 1981. I've got noted, and it's got this wizard looking at this, must be encapsulated the basic version in his world. And this again, it only goes up to 64 pages. Yep, 64. And that basically the two together represents an entire system. And I think there's some duplication in here. Some of the combat is duplicated. And I suppose later editions what they did was try to pull them together into one. I do have a copy of the one that came afterwards, the basic, but I've never really quite gelled with the format, and something about the internal art in it, and I don't know, it just didn't feel right. Whereas I picked this one up and I just thought this is terrific. I really liked it. And as I think I've said on my poll update video, which actually has a lot of information on it about what I'm talking about today, and it might be worthwhile watching that as a recap. This really captivates me from the point of view of it represents a continuity for me for my Holmes days. So I'll come and explain all that. I've got a sheet where and I have a normal format for my introductory videos, where I really just go through some of my background when it comes to this particular game, and what I think is the strong points about the system, and what I'm going to try and bring out in the campaign. So I've got a background section. I talk about what the BX system is all about to me. I'm going to talk about what features are going to appear in my campaign. And then I've got my campaign development process, the high level that we're going to be going through together. I'm quickly going to touch on the campaign setting, and I really went to town on the update video when I was talking about the poll results. And I think I may be terrifying people about my ideas about what I call my barony concept, but I'll explain that again, not in as much detail this time. Yeah, so it's not really that much to go through. I don't even know if I'm going to be, going the full. I usually do about 40-minute videos, but let's see how we get on. Okay, so let's come to the background. Now, as I said, I played my first experience of Dungeons and Dragons and any actual fantasy role-playing game was the Holmes Basic Edition. And that was published in 1977. And I think we got our hands on a copy. I think in the UK, they produced it as a booklet. I think it maybe was Games Workshop, because Games Workshop seemed to be doing a lot of the TSR stuff in the UK. And we got the booklet, and we all clubbed together with our pocket money, and we all took it in turns to have a look at the rule book, and were absolutely blown away and so captivated by it. It was such a novel concept. We'd played sort of games that were kind of similar, and I think we were all doing kind of proto role playing in our own kind of way, in our wargaming way, and all our kind of hobbies type things. But this really kind of almost formalized it, and suddenly we had the ability to have wizards and fighters and thieves, and go down dungeons and slay dragons and do all that orc stuff and explore keeps, and it seemed amazing, all this experience. And I did the classic thing, which I suppose a lot of people did, was as soon as the Player's Handbook came out, and that was the first book we ever got our hands on, and this is my original copy. So I don't have my Holmes edition, or at least I haven't been able to find it. And if I did, it's probably going to be a very beat up copy, because we played it to death. This is my original Player's Handbook, and again in the UK, Games Workshop published a booklet, because I know it's hardback in the USA, and we played this in conjunction with our home set, as a kind of hybrid. So we really, it was very detailed on the character classes, but that's exactly what we wanted, because we felt a wee bit, I think like a lot of players of basic D&D, it's the concept of having races as classes, and all the things that are offered in this. You've got rangers, you've got paladins, druids. I just think it was so tantalizing that we just couldn't resist it. So that's really what we kind of cut our teeth in after probably played the Holmes Pure for maybe about 3 or 4 months, and then we got our hands on the Player's Handbook and the Monster Manual, and we were playing away to our heart's content for quite some time, until the Dungeon Master's Guide came along in 1979, and that changed everything, because we just did a straight conversion, basically graduated from the School of Role Playing to the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and never really returned to the Holmes edition or basic D&D. And I think potentially you move on from an edition, but maybe you lose some of the just the kind of the initial kind of naivety of it, the charm, and the simplicity. But it seemed like onwards and onwards and upwards, and it would be just a natural progression, AD&D. So hopefully I'm going to recapture this kind of almost like go back in time a wee bit and say on an alternative timeline, there was no AD&D, and I just morphed into these editions from my homes. We had our own homebrew setting. We had what I call the Great Wilderness setting. So it was basically just a very simple map, which had like a great big river in it, up the center, going out into the sea. And on one side there was, I think it was on the right side, or that would be the east side, there was this enormous wilderness area, and on the left side there was a kingdom, and it had all the standard kind of fantasy tropes. It had the medieval kingdom. It had the orc areas up in the mountains. It had dwarves sitting there in their holds. It had elves in the forest. It had everything that you would expect. And the type of games that we were playing, I think we spent a lot of time in what we called the Old Keep, which was a multi-level dungeon that we used to go up and down. And we had a lot of fun in another thing called the Dwarven Ruin. I can't remember what it was called, but it was effectively a Dwarven Ruin city. And again, that was like a mega dungeon. Some of the characters that kind of I remember fondly, my own characters, Thingol Greycloak, and he was our multi-class half-elf. And Greenface the throat slitter, who was a little gnome assassin. We were playing away with the hybrid. We still had the basic the combat and stuff like that, because the Player's Handbook doesn't really go into detail on it. Doesn't have combat tables and whatever. So actually, we're really still using the homes for well into 1979. So you're talking about almost 2 years of role playing with the basic. So I've got a bit of pedigree, I suppose, if you can say there's a pedigree. As I say, I just want to try and recapture that. And looking at the BX system itself, we've got these two rule books. I'll put them kind of side by side, so they're kind of straddling the page. I think the BX version, it seems like Holmes evolved. So if you can imagine that Holmes evolved, it turned into this, and it's turned into a complete game system. So whereas Holmes had some gaps, and it didn't really, it didn't go into higher levels, and it didn't seem to have a rounded, almost like, it didn't have, like, when you got outside the dungeon, it didn't really have too much about, just to explain what the wilderness was like, and what whether you'd go to a settlement or not, and are you going to come across an armorer, and what type of equipment. This has all that kind of information, not in spades, not like AD&D, but it's still got sufficient that you can work on it as a kind of basic model, that you don't need all the detail, which I've found with this game. I think that's what I'm going to try to major on, are the specific strengths of the game, which I'm going to try and draw out through this high level here, and then actual play experience. So as I've said before, I'm enthusiastic to play another form of D&D, which offers a different approach or way. This will be in quite a stark contrast to my AD&D campaign, which is quite granular and detailed, and I go down to quite a bit of I go really under the bonnet on the campaign. It's quite meticulous and methodical. I want to present a different solo experience and mechanics and style, and that's going to be, in this campaign, it's going to be faster and less focus on detail. So I'm going to play a bit more have a bit more freedom, a bit more flexibility. I'm not going to be constrained to the rules as much, partly because the rules aren't as expansive as AD&D, and also because I just feel that I can modify it, and I've got the personal experience that I want to try to bring to the game as well. Hopefully that's all going to recapture the charm and excitement of the first adventures. So hopefully going to feel like I was when I went down the old keep. It was a kind of a strange dungeon, like a lot of, like, when you get like 14 and 15-year-old boys creating these dungeons, they're not exactly your believable ecology. You've got like people in one room next to another set of different type of monsters, but it was all great fun, and we thoroughly enjoyed it. So I want to try and recapture that kind of feeling. It's a rules-light philosophy, streamlined and faster pace. So I think that is going to really assist in it's going to facilitate any attempt I have to make it a bit more light-hearted and a bit more fun. I'm not to say that I always like sounding like my other campaigns are a bit dreary and meticulous. They're not. I'm really having a lot of fun with them, but it's a different kind of fun. So I think I want to try and bring out maybe a bit more light-hearted. The characters are going to do really quite heroic things in this, I think, and maybe there's going to be a more rapid turnover of characters, because I just got to feel that it's going to be a bit more intense and or potentially bloody and violent. You know, the others are, but I just feel that the characters have maybe a bit more longevity. In this one, there might be a bit more of a turnover. Who's to say? You know, it might be the opposite. I might have characters that evolve into 5th or 6th level over a few months. Let's see. And it's going to be one of the things I like about all my channels. It's my approach. I want to play BX my way and using my own solo mechanics and my own world setting. So I'm not going to be using any kind of GM emulator or anything like that. Similar to any of my other channels, I just like to do my own thing and basically put my own solo system on top of these books here. I like to have my own world setting. I don't want to set it in, say, Greyhawk or Blackmoor or Mistra. I think Mistra is the, you know, this I've looked at it and I think this is a fantastic setting. The one that they suggest at the back of the book. Yeah, this one here, and this is quite a big map actually when you do it, and it's got like areas. But I'm going to have something similar. I'm going to call it my barony, and it'll have monster populations. It'll have all the monsters in this game, but it's not going to be that particular setting. It's going to be my own. And the last thing I need to say about what I'm going to do with the system, I'm going to have very much a retro style. It's going to be a kind of old school format, and that's really kind of my style that I like to play. It's very I think I've said this on many occasions. I'm not going to bring out fantasy art or use any of the gadgetry of modern technology. It's all going to be quite analog and basically grounded in what we had to hand in the late 1970s. So I think one of my conceits is that I transport you back to whenever this game came out. So in this case, it's going to be you're back in 1981. You're going to go and watch Terminator and all that sort of stuff soon. I think Conan's about to come out. It's all that kind of time. I think I'm going to be very much facilitated by the game being more summarized and modifiable to do that. It's just going to have just an innate feel to it that is a bit more. I think it's going to be simple but not simplistic, if that makes any sense. Because I'm not saying that it is a simple system, or it is kind of just, you know, you can be, you know, kind of trifle with it. I think you can bring in as much sophistication or levels that you want to it. I just want to try and experiment with it and see what I can do with it, but on my own terms. And hopefully when I say on my own terms, I can bring you as the audience along with me. And I think maybe I've demonstrated that on my other channels where I've just done my own thing. And I still have people watching and saying, yeah, they really like it. And, you know, I'm really delighted that is the case. And I'm hoping it's exactly the same with this. I've got the right kind of formula. Maybe you just get a bit more, more action packed in this one. Well, I'm hoping. And then the features of the campaign. Now, I think this is quite important to emphasize because I think this might actually make it quite much easier for me to make some of this distinctive. And that would be where I'm going to have character archetypes. So not only do you have these very simple character, you know, high-level character classes, and races being character. When it comes to their design, I'm going to have a very quite a simple kind of 1d10 or whatever, or 1d6 system that just draws out distinctive archetypes that these characters will more or less behave in the game world, and that's just going to make it a bit more simple for me to administer them. And as a group, they will have almost built-in part of their DNA, motivations and ways of behaving. And I don't see anything wrong with that, because that's just going to be the style of this campaign. I'm just going to indulge in the inner child, and go for the archetype. And I'm just going to reject any criticism that says, oh, you don't have any nuance to these, they're two-dimensional, oh my goodness, there's no complexity. I don't want all this kind of postmodernism, sophistication, and people that aren't, they're either good or they're evil. There's not going to be any moral ambiguity in this campaign. It's all going to be very kind of black and white. And there will be people that are maybe on the margins, because you have the neutral alignment, and that's where they are covered. But I'm not going to maybe have like a modernist view of psychology. The setting choice, I'm going to talk about the barony concept and my random design. I won't go into too much detail on that just now. I'll wait till towards the end. And also, I do allow you to go back to my update 3 video. It's in a separate playlist where I talk about this game winning the poll, and then I go to town a bit on the on what I call the barony concept, which is the setting. And I think that's going to produce a lot of character for my game. Like any, I suppose, any DM doing their own homebrew campaign, they bring to the table something that's part of themselves. And I'm going to be facilitated in this by a random process. So it's not all going to be me. It's going to be my trusty friends. I'll just go and get them. My dice. These dice here, they're going to help me out. They're going to be my main props and allies. And then I'm going to go down the route of the 10 mission types. And there are 10 missions in this booklet. Where is it? It's page 8. I thought it was towards the end. Yeah, here we go. Choose a scenario. So I'm just going to go down the simple route. I've got 10 options, and I'm going to try and do them all. And I'm going to say this is our palette of different options, our suite of options. This is what we're going to decide on, what we're going to do. Maybe one session we're going to be rescuing prisoners. Maybe that will last a couple of episodes, and then the next couple of episodes escaping from enemies. And I'll generate the I'll create the context for the scenario and shape the adventure around what the theme of this is in my game world. And just a simple thing to decide on the setting. I'll be able to draw from these, and they'll just be like the almost the stereotypical kind of dungeon adventures, wilderness adventures, everything you love in fantasy. I'm not going to be snobbish about it or try to go for anything too sophisticated. It's if I like it, I'll have it. I'm going to really major on the atmosphere and dressing, and employ what I call my zoom mechanic, where I just zoom in on things and maybe go to town on some of the say we the characters come into a room. I might just decide because I feel like it. Or I might have a trigger point as part of my mechanic where I really go to town on describing what it looks like, what the sounds are, whether it's got any furniture in it, and I'll use my I'll use the inferences of the die roll and the context to basically set the scene through this process. I'm experimenting with it in my Traveller campaign. I call it encounter visualization, and in this it's just going to be called a zoom mechanic, basically where we zoom in on the scene and try to flesh it out and give it some atmospheric feel and some sensory perception of what's going on. Also, I'm going to employ some simple oracles for the core narrative and world interaction. So I might have a binary questions one. I might have one that describes the scene and events, descriptions and details. And we're going to use them to facilitate my creative process there. I don't really use oracles at all. So I thought maybe this is, in a more straightforward context, like BXD&D. It might be an easier way to bring these systems in. So I'm willing to give them a bit of a shot. I think that might be quite a lot of fun. I've already tried out the kind of yes/no one before, and I found it paid a lot of dividends. It really was producing some quite interesting results. And if it's even a case of that's the only thing I do, to me that's going to bring something to the party. Okay. Moving on, the mechanics for NPC motivation and interaction. So I'm going to have some tables and some, not going to go to town on this, but I will have some NPC motivation and some specific procedures to make that a bit more realistic and challenging for the role-playing visualization and experience. And I just love interaction with the characters and the environments and people. I think you can already tell if you look at a lot of my videos, I spend a lot of time with my characters having reaction rolls or whatever mechanic with the NPCs, and that generates a very rich source of adventure and ideas and further developments down the line. So I am really going to be going for that too in this. And I thought something else that I quite like to do is bring in what I call combat tactics and options, and really kind of almost spice up the combat side, and maybe have some tactical ideas in it, like maybe one of the characters decide, well, I'm going to do a bit of flanking, or maybe the monsters on that side, and they think, right, our tactic is to flank, or our tactic is to focus on the weakest, or maybe we want to move around, or in the actual individual combat, I want to evade more. So maybe I can build these type of things in. So it's the case that you get your characters jumping on the table, or doing, swinging on a rope, and doing all the kind of exciting stuff of heroic fantasy, and try to bring that into the combat scene. It sounds like I'm being quite simplistic about it, and it's going to be straightforward. It's probably not going to be, but I don't see any. I think with a flexible system like this, I think it has the ability to absorb in that kind of creative input. And if it's imagine I was the dungeon master, and if I wanted a bit of excitement, I would just say, all right, the monster jumps on the table and leaps over your head, and the next minute it's behind you and whacks you in the back. If I want to do that, I might just do that. Maybe not on the first adventure, and maybe try and focus it in. And then on the dungeon design, I'm going to have my own system. Now, there is some very basic dungeon design here, where it gives you some suggestions of how to stock the dungeon. And I think this expands it in the cook, in the expert rules at the back. There's a bit more explanation of how you can design. Here we go, designing dungeons, how to stock it. I am just going to expand that out and kind of have some thoughts about how I'm going to pull the dungeon together. Way back in the day, White Dwarf used to produce some ideas about random dungeons. So I might try to resurrect that, and then I'll get the original period feel of what just the really basic ways, the ideas. There was these things, they had little mini, it's a bit like if you've ever played the game Dragon Quest, where you have little cards that show you maybe little portions of rooms and whatever, and you put them together in a kind of tile system. I might have something like that, or maybe something that's down the line of say Advanced Hero Quest, which has got a kind of dungeon system. I'm not too sure about it just now. But then I have plenty of time just now because we won't be down our first dungeon for a few episodes now. So I've got a bit of time to do. And as I say, I'm not going to make a very sophisticated system. It's going to be quite simple. There are a lot of basic stuff in here that I'm going to use as the core. And I'm just really going to do a bit of an overlay on top of that. And then have a random events table, and I'll have just probably every day a daily happenings, which might cover all sorts of things. You know, whether we have say an interesting NPC appears, or there's a freak weather, or all sorts of interesting. I jotted down a few ideas on that one. Let me just see if I got my little table. This is where I put all my brainstorming. Yeah, a table that might have, I've only got 1 to 4 on this one, and then 1 to 4 here, but things like event, or place, or weather, patron, rumor, person, encounter, reward, alliance, mission, mystery, misunderstanding, travel, journey, magic, and corruption. And I just make an inference of those every day, and say, well, that's what happens, and use my creativity, but have a kind of prompt. So I suppose it's a bit like an oracle in that instance. Okay, have a quick inhale of breath. What I plan to do, like all my solo campaigns, is to have a plan of attack. And that involves basically a checklist, and I have some certain steps that I follow. And this is probably going to be the kind of logical order that I go in. The exception being the control framework, which I'll just come to at the end. So the first thing we're probably going to do, in fact we will be character creation. And there are rules for a random party in here at the back here, creating one. I'll just get to it. Here we go. Creating an NPC party, and I'm going to morph that into a specifically PC party, and I'm going to use these parameters to do that. And then create our characters, and I'll assign them some archetypes and some motivations and personality. Again, it's going to be very high level. It's not going to, for my RuneQuest one, I'm going really quite to town on that. I'm already, I think, up to the 3rd episode on, and we're still developing them. But I'm having an absolute blast doing that. My Traveller one characters took a long time. We all know about the Traveller previous experience process. It's quite notorious, but again, I had a really nice time generating my characters, and I feel that they've got quite a bit of depth behind them. We're going to do probably a light touch on this. It's going to be pretty high level, but we're still going to, hopefully at the end we should have between, say, I don't know, 4 to 6 characters that we're ready to go with. Level 1, raw and ready to go. And then the starting settlement, we'll place them in. This will be our base point and safe zone. And I'll do some very basic kind of design on that. Again, there are a few suggestions of what you do in this book here. I'll just major on them and try to expand them a bit with some solo-friendly mechanics. And at the same time, I'll be kind of fleshing out the local setting, definition, and design. And with my barony concept, I will be doing an overall, probably around about this entire process. I will be doing my actual design, and that will probably when that's where we did local setting, definition, and design. I'll probably be bringing in that mechanic to its kind of crescendo, and we'll actually be assigning, say, the elven area, I'll be assigning them to the forest and actually showing on a map where all these things are. And then I've already talked about the mission generation 1 to 10. We'll start generating some adventures for the characters to go in within a kind of realistic context. I'm not certainly just going to say that they go into the tavern, and there's like a poster up saying, well, you have choice of 1 to 10 on this. Which one are you going to go for? It's going to be a bit more discreet than that and a bit more subtle. But it's still going to be quite a kind of basic basic system. I'm not maybe going to have too much nuance to it. You know, that's going to be quite high level. And then the NPC development, the world events, and phasing in the barony concepts. Now, the barony concepts are a bit different in the term of the longer term plan. That there are some of the maybe more I suppose experimental side of my barony concept, the more kind of high level ideas might start phasing them in. And then throughout everything, I'm going to have a control framework, but it's going to be very light touch. So basically that's the administration system, having a control of the overall process, and saying, okay, we've reached this stage, we're moving on to the next one, and, you know, controlling this little table of events and saying, right, okay, this is when they're due, and we should be doing that today. So basically it's like the admin side. Okay, final thing that I need to talk about, but as part of this introductory video, is the campaign setting and the barony concept. So I'm saying that I'm going to place these characters in this campaign setting, which is a high fantasy frontier location. It's going to be a remote barony. It's going to be bordering a mysterious wilderness with an ancient forest. There's going to be jagged mountain chain, marshland. There's going to be haunted barrens and a large freshwater lake and river. So we have set up the location and what it's like, and it's going to be stock full of all these standard fantasy fare. So it's a very comfortable and pleasant fantasy environment for us to immerse ourselves in. I don't really want to stretch at this stage. I'd really quite just go for vanilla on this one, and then we're going to create a bit of spice further down the line. On the settlement side, it's going to be mainly small human settlements, but also reclusive elves, active dwarven miners, and halflings, in addition to standard monsters and evil fantasy races. So we're going to stock it with our standard everything, all the monsters in these books, and the standard races that you would expect to live in settlements. We're going to have orcs living in where you would expect orcs to live, that type of stuff. And then the final layer, the mystical side, and we're going to have ancient ruins and places of mystery of a lost civilization dotted across the region. So as a whole, we've got the entire campaign setting. Now, I had derived some what I call options in ascending fantasy intensity, which in a kind of in English means basically I go from 1 to 6. Let's get to the next page. 1 to 6 on the different versions of the barony. So barony version 1 to barony version 6, and they get a bit more left field the more you go. Barony version 1, where I design the setting for the characters to begin the adventures. So I will just design all that and draw it on a map. Barony version 2 is a random setting using core concepts and features, all of this stuff, but using a solar mechanic to distribute and detail. And I have an innate preference for Barony version 2. All my other campaigns are random. They are based on a random selection. It has generated major dividends for my game. I don't think I'd want to spoil the formula. In fact, I want to try to ramp it up on this one. And then Barony version 3 is as version 2, which is all random, but with these core concepts, but with the addition of a threat, a malevolent force incursion on the region. So this is your boss monster. It's come in, maybe it's an evil, heading up an evil order of knights, or an orc warlord, or a bugbear chieftain, or a necromancer, or a lich, or something of major significance that is galvanizing and mobilizing the local evil denizens of the region, or bringing in their own crack troops, skeleton hordes, or elite chaos warriors, that type of thing. And they are making a direct threat to the Baron and the barony. And then Barony version 4 is the now I do recommend you to just go over to and see my channel update 3, where I really explain Barony version 4 in a lot of detail, and I don't really see the point of maybe me repeating this here. I think you'll probably get a lot more. I use quite a bit of passion in describing this, but in a nutshell, this posits the barony, but what's happened is that an evil mage in the past, we're talking maybe about 300 years ago, with the Baron's ancestors, he had a big fallout, and what he did as a curse, he created up to 10 copies of the barony, and through these discs, I call them, across the different planes, and they landed in planes that were quite hostile, different types of hostile. So you would have tundras and deserts and jungles, and then in fact, it's probably faster just to read it. So, in the past, an evil mage banished by the Baron's ancestor and makes a pact with the Lords of Chaos to curse the Baron and transport clones of the barony into hostile planes and environments. So there's the tundra, the desert, the jungle, etc. And within that, there's evil chaos forces appropriate to the plane in the ascendancy. So not only do they go to horrible environments, they are up against evil chaos forces tailored to that environment, with the assumption that those chaos forces destroy or take over and enslave the barons duplicates, and take over their possessions and their keeps and their castles and their towns, and enslave the population. Now it's 300 years later, and each disc has evolved differently. The characters are in the original version. The current Baron has a mysterious messenger from law to restore justice and allow the baronies to be united. So he says that you're living under a misconception. You're actually, there has been a curse, because the current one of the central cruelties of this evil mage was that the version 1 wasn't aware that there was these other clones created. And it's only now that the Baron's been informed, and he's motivated to spread the word and liberate his peoples across the different planes. And within version 1, there's a rare mineral, or there's artifacts that exist in the dungeons and ruins, which allow this planar magic and transport through portals. And this version has the resource. So that is a central dynamic of the overall situation, that the characters might not only adventure, but they have a motivation maybe to go into some of these dungeons and get either an artifact or a mineral that facilitates this planar travel. So that is quite out there, this one. So that could morph into the game. I'm saying, that's where I'm talking about phase in the barony concepts here. I could phase in this. And then barony version 5, I think this is a step too far, where we actually start our campaign in one of the clone versions. And then barony version 6, I do like barony version 6, which sees a struggle, sees the return of the mage as the now I was talking about the gunslinger and that Stephen King, and I had a mental block for Stephen King. I couldn't remember his name. So it's Stephen King that wrote the gunslinger, and this is going to be like the mage is a bit like the Man in Black character, he was a very malevolent stranger, and he's in direct opposition to the visitor who's come to the Baron and said, hey, you've got a bit of a problem here. There's all these other planes with these different versions of you. They are being enslaved and brutalized. I think you really need to do something to help. And law will provide you with some assistance in that respect, because we have become stronger now. Chaos is not in the ascendancy. So that has me gone through everything. And everything I really want to talk about on the first in the hopefully many entertaining and rewarding episodes of Dungeons and Dragons basic rules, expert rules. I am going to do my level best to And from my own point of view, I'm really looking forward to really kind of get back to get back to basics, or basics and experts, and almost like roll the sleeves up and say, yeah, we're almost like ground zero. Let's go basic fantasy. Everything that all your tropes, all your archetypes, everything. We're going to be playing down the dungeon. The dungeon is going to be brought back into vogue. It's going to be quite sophisticated model in this environment. We're not going to be snobbish or anything anymore. It's just going to be, this is what almost like be quite juvenile in our approach, but maybe not too juvenile. We'll have measured and a mature approach to that thing. So I think maybe I've gone on enough for today. Hopefully I have maybe tantalized you. If you want to see what else I do, probably the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons that's going to be quite a nice contrast to this, I think. I do have a very mature campaign. And I've only done a couple of weeks, but I've gone into quite a bit of detail in each of the episodes. They've done quite a lot of dungeon delving already. It's going to be more of the same in this, but with the lighter touch, less complicated rules. It's going to be probably a faster pace, and it's going to be more action. It's going to be a different type of experience, hopefully. I'm really looking forward to it. Okay, well, thank you very much for joining me in this. Well done to Basic and Expert Dungeons and Dragons for making the top spot in our poll. Yeah, I'll be phasing this in over the course of this month, and then probably escalating the production from July onwards. Yeah, join me in the inaugural character creation episode next, and maybe I can draw out some high-level stuff about the setting too at the same time. Okay, once again, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.